Hi, friends, and welcome back to the College Essay Guy podcast. So today's episode, we are revisiting Alisha. And if you've been following along on our episodes, we've been doing sort of a behind the scenes of her process. And we work through her personal statement, sort of from start to finish. And these are her supplemental essays. In particular, she's focused on Colombia. So in this session, Alisha and I explore what makes a great list response for Colombia. This is where they ask you to talk about books, podcasts, etc., that you're into. How can you refine a topic that feels a little too common into something that might stand out a little bit more? I'll show a simple way to use the roles and identities exercise to focus a short essay. We'll talk about strategies for approaching the navigating differences essay that's become more popular. And then we'll talk about how to tackle both a why us essay and a why major essay. Alisha's a current high school senior who loves science, movies, and discovering new places. When she's not studying the brain, she's mentoring younger students through her program Running Start or planning her next adventure. I hope you enjoy our session. Hi, Alisha. Welcome back.
Hi, Ethan. How are you? It's nice to be back.
It's great to see you and great to hear you. So, how's writing coming along?
Writing's going pretty good. I think I'm happy for my first draft. All of my essays are a bit over because obviously Colombia's 150 words are a little hard to keep under the word limit, but I think I'm pretty happy for it right now.
Cool. So just to kind of give the big picture perspective for folks, you've worked on the Columbia supplemental essays and you're submitting, I'm guessing in 3 weeks or so?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
January.
Okay,
Early
great.
January.
The reason I say that is I think that there are certain notes that I would give you with 3 weeks left versus if we had 1 week left. So if I see stuff, I'll say stuff in terms of, what needs revising, because 3 weeks I think is a good amount of time to be able to make some changes. And then also to give folks context, you've worked on a list of, books, journals, websites, podcasts, etc. You've worked on an essay that's about an aspect of your life that you feel has shaped you. And you've said a little bit about how it will contribute to Columbia's multidimensional and collaborative environment. That's the second one. The third one asks you to describe a time when you didn't agree with someone and talk about how you engaged with them and what you took away. The fourth one is a situation where you've navigated adversity. The fifth one is why Colombia. And the sixth one is a why major. So let's start at the top. I love when you read them. So maybe just read through your list and then we'll share thoughts.
Okay. So first for the books, I have The Alchemist, The Brain That Changes Itself, The Hobbit, Incognito, The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat, Notes on a Nervous Planet. And then for podcasts, I have Hidden Brain, Radiolab, Huberman Lab, Lex Friedman Podcast. And then for web essays, I have MIT Tech Review, Wired. And for talks and lectures, I have Stanford Human-Centered AI Seminars and Zuckerman Institute Seminars. And then for films, I have The Social Network, Dune Part 2, Before Sunrise, Memento. And for exhibits and museums, I have the British Museum, Lahore Fort's Sheesh Mahal, and then that's what I have so far.
Great. So just curious, why did you choose the ones you chose here? And by the way, for those listening, the prompt is really just list a selection of text, resources, and outlets that have contributed to your intellectual development outside of academic courses. And they ask you to not list the authors. So you've done it exactly what they've asked. Yeah. So back to the question, why did you pick what you picked?
So what I have here is kind of a mix of my favorite, just personal kind of media stuff, but then also a little mix of kind of hinting at the major that I want, which is neuroscience, and books that I remember talking about in my AP psychology class, and then podcasts I've always listened to. So the books, The Alchemist is my favorite book ever, and so is The Hobbit. That's obviously not neuroscience, but it is kind of, The Alchemist I feel built me a lot intellectually, a lot as well. And podcast Hidden Brain, I used to listen to that every morning, and it's really cool. The web essays, I guess that's a tool I've used to research a little bit, and I've done a little bit of research. And then films is just purely like I love movies, so I just like picked my top favorite ones. And then yeah, one cool thing that I actually mentioned was this one, Lahore Fort's Sheesh Mahal, was like a little bit of like a cultural thing. I wasn't even sure if I should mention it, but when I visited Pakistan, it's kind of not really a museum, but like an architecture, like history kind of spot. And I learned so much about like art history and then also just like history about Pakistan. And it was like a really cool moment. So I wasn't sure if I should include it, but I thought it was kind of unique and like cool.
Yeah. I mean, it seems great. And the reader may or may not know what that is,
Mhm.
but I think it's fine. And I think you have a lovely variety here of different sides of yourself. Like you said, there's plenty of science stuff, which I think is great. I love knowing that this is stuff that you legit are interested in. I think sometimes students will get to this and they'll be like, oh my gosh, I don't really have things. So they'll go and like read the New York Times for a week and they'll be like, now I can put New York Times. But it sounds like this is stuff that's really impacted you. So that's neat. And I actually, yeah, I love the movies just personally because I have connections with some of these films. In fact, all of them in some way, just
Really?
coincidentally. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I love
Dune
the
2
variety
was
here.
like too good. I watched, and then I also did some research in Timothy Chalamet's alumni of Columbia, and I was like, perfect.
Nice. Cool. Well, I don't honestly have a lot of notes on these. I think this is great. If you have something that occurs to you that you're like, oh, I should throw that in, I think it's fine to include it. But what this shows is, to me, as a curious mind, someone who's interested in exploring science, things like you said, psychology, and sort of what the latest is, in tech. And again, if you've got something that pops up in the coming weeks or so that you want to throw in there and you switch it out, it's fine. It'll be kind of a lateral move. We talk about, maybe we talked about this, but these lateral moves, sometimes students obsess over this. Like they're like, should I put this or should I put that? And I think if the general vibe is like smart and varied for this list, like I think you're good. So anything that you switch out is not going to be a deal maker or deal breaker. It's just a matter of like, oh, there's this thing that I really love. Great, put it in. But otherwise, I think you're pretty solid.
Okay.
So the second prompt reads, tell us about an aspect of your life so far or your lived experience that is important to you and describe how it has shaped the way you would learn from and contribute to Columbia's multidimensional and collaborative environment. So context for the reader, the thing that I'm looking for here is I want to see half you, something about you, your experience, something that isn't already in your personal statement. And if listeners, you haven't listened, you might want to go back and listen to the most recent episode that Alisha and I recorded where we talked through the personal statement so you can hear that context. And then in the second half, I want to really get some specifics about how you will contribute to Columbia. So if not specific offerings, at least, and maybe I'll suggest specific offerings, that you put those in, but specific ways that you'll be able to contribute. So I think that should be really clear. So maybe read it and then we'll talk about it.
Okay.
Great.
We said, growing up in New York City in an immigrant family shaped how I understand people. Living in such a dense, diverse place meant I was constantly surrounded by different lives, circumstances, and ways of being. My family did charity work often, so I learned early that someone's situation is rarely a reflection of their character. I developed a habit of looking beyond first impressions. Everyone carries hidden histories and battles, and I've always been drawn to understanding what might have happened in someone's life to shape who they are. At home, growing up between cultures taught me the same lesson in a different way. When my younger sister was born, taking care of her made me more observant and patient, teaching me to notice needs before they were spoken. At Columbia's diverse and collaborative environment, I would contribute to a community where people feel understood rather than reduced to assumptions. It's the kind of environment where complexity is valued, so I plan to challenge the present by questioning common narratives we use to explain human behavior, and I hope to enrich the future by building a world where every kind of mind has a way to thrive.
Great. So first things first, let's talk topic. What would you describe as the topic? And then why did you choose that topic?
I think I would describe it as kind of moving around and like growing up in a different perspective than like what I am, what I what people have where I live now has kind of taught me to have a more like diverse perspective, and it's also like built a sense of empathy in me that I feel like not to like be like brag or whatever, just like be more have more empathy than like maybe some others might have. And then I would like to like contribute to the environment. And I kind of hinted at just like I want to like challenge like narratives about human behavior, which I don't know, I feel like might tie into neuroscience. And I feel like this might be like a bit of a basic topic, which is one of the things that I was kind of worried about. Yeah, I wasn't sure. So,
hmm Yeah. When you say basic topic, what do you mean?
like, I feel like a lot of people have like moved around. So it might be like a little bit obvious. So,
hmm hmm It's interesting. You said moving around. When I read this, what I sense or what I can tell. So you talk about growing up in New York City, which I don't think I knew that about you. What
yeah.
ages did you live there from when to when?
So I was born in Boston. And then since I was like two to like 8, I grew up in New York City. So
Cool.
that's 6 years. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you mentioned moving around, but
Mhm.
when I read what you have, I don't get the sense of moving around.
Mhm.
I get New York City, but I don't get the moving thing yet because I don't think it's actually mentioned.
Yeah. Right. I did have a portion about kind of when I moved to San Diego, then like I saw like there were different perspectives and stuff, but I don't know, something about it felt like a little like I was trying to be all like high and like better than everyone else, and I didn't really like it too much. But
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah. So my take on topics is that it's in the approach. So what I mean by this is like two students can write about moving around or being a third culture kid or living in a particular city. But one essay is going to sound, like you said, basic, and the other essay is going to sound super standout based on how you write about it. And there are a few things that you can do in order to stand out with a topic that's more common. So the way I think of it is like topics are kind of on a spectrum of like common topic to uncommon topic. Obviously, if it's more uncommon, then it's going to instantly stand out more. The more common the topic is, the more you have to do the things that we'll talk about in just a second in order to stand out. And that goes for like, if you were to write about soccer or if you were to write about, a common instrument like playing the piano. So here's a scan though that you can give, and anybody who's listening, you can give yourself the same scan. Take a look at your sentences real quick. And I want you to look and scan for which of these are uniquely Alicia's, like only you could have written this sentence versus you read it and you're like, oh, I could see how somebody else could have maybe written that sentence. So
Mhm.
scan it for a second and give me like a percentage that feels like unique to you versus somebody else maybe could have written it.
Yeah, not a lot of it. I think one sentence that I really like is like that everyone carries hidden histories and battles, and I've always been drawn to understanding what might have happened. But that's kind of like that's it. And then the conclusion is kind of just me as well. So
hmm Which part feels just you?
the I developed oh wait, oops. Everyone carries hidden histories and
Yeah.
battles. It's been drawn to that
Got
one.
that one.
And
Yeah. Was there another part that feels uniquely you?
also this one, like I plan to challenge the present by questioning common narratives we use to explain human behavior. And I
Mhm.
hope to enrich the future by building a world where everyone has a kind of mind to thrive.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So we're looking at like maybe a third of it or a quarter of it is uniquely you. And then the
Yeah.
rest of it is maybe something somebody else could write. So
Yeah.
the reason I'm using that scan with you is when you mentioned basic, I was like, oh, my version of this is like, could somebody else have written this? So,
Mhm.
okay. So let me ask, did we at some point talk about a different topic for this one?
We did talk about a different topic. We talked about a couple actually. So one I think we mentioned was like the me wearing hijab was one
Mhm.
because it's kind of a lived experience that I've had. And then another one was that experience. Yeah, I think that was the only one. Yeah.
Okay. So what had you pick this one over that one? And just so you know, I don't have a strong preference. I'm just curious. What
Yeah.
had you pick this one?
Actually, the next supplemental kind of goes into like hijab,
Mhm.
and that's why I was like, okay, I kind of have to pick something else then. And then yeah, that was kind of
Okay.
it.
Cool. Okay. So if we go with this topic about moving around, what we need, first of all, is we need specific sentences that and details that would be particular to you that no one else would be writing about. So my first question, this is just for you to think about, is what are specific experiences related to even as specific as like growing up in New York City in an immigrant family?
Mhm.
Like, what did you experience that another student who is applying to Columbia, who grew up in New York City in an immigrant family, like, you see how like niche and specific we're getting?
Yeah.
Assume that there will be some number of students who have also grown up in New York City in an immigrant family. What will set your experience apart from theirs, just in the details? And then the second piece of it is the so what. What can you say about that experience that will stand out? And you've already got, as you pointed out, some interesting different specifics in terms of the insights, the so what's. But just to go back to this, what do you think sets your experience apart from another student from an immigrant family who grew up in New York City?
I think yeah, like I said, like I've always been drawn to understanding what might have happened. And my family did a lot of like charity work, and we were kind of really like into the community there. Like we like would always like interact with people and like people who are less fortunate as well. And I think I always like I built that kind of like just empathy. Yeah, I'm not sure. Like that's kind of the main thing of this essay. Yeah.
So I want to suggest two different mini exercises. Each one will take about a minute. And what it'll do is it'll give you different ideas of things that you can say here. So let me say first, what you have is good.
Mhm.
Like, you experiencing these experiences, like certainly growing up in New York City in an immigrant family will be similar to some students, but it will differentiate you among most of the applicants. And then the value of empathy and being able to see people is a great value. So that's not bad or wrong. I just think it's not going to stand out as much as it might.
Yeah.
So these are going to be go-to exercises. And some people listening will be like, oh, really? He's bringing these exercises out again? But I bring them out because they work. So the first one is the roles and identities list. And we've talked a little bit about these, but I think every supplemental essay is an opportunity for a different role or identity, a different side of you to come through. And we sort of know you're empathetic based on your personal statement, just based on the way that you listen to that mother in that interaction connected to the extracurricular activity. We sort of have that part of you. So I want you to scan the roles and identities list. And I'm going to say, let's hold empathy and that the empathizer side of you. Let's put it on the shelf for just a minute and pin it. Are there other roles and identities that you developed either from living in New York City and growing up there, when you were young, and from moving that you feel like, yeah, you developed over time? Take a look at this list. And we don't have to stop on just one, but I want you to just list, let's say, a few that come to mind that could be candidates. And for the person who's listening, who's like, what does he mean, the roles and identities exercise? In the show notes, you'll find a link to an exercise called the roles and identities. And it's really a list. And it's got things like activist and adventurer and advocate, etc. So take your time, take as much time as you need.
So one that stands out to me as I like just like look at it is advocate. I think like tying to like my family doing a lot of like work giving back in the community is one. Another is where'd it go? Critical thinker, which is kind of just like random, but I like one of the kind of like really big parts of my life is this is also kind of like someone else maybe be able to write this, but just like growing up with my brother like at like a really close age, and we were like the oldest in our like family, I guess. We were kind of treated as like grown kids when we were like 6 years old, and like we talked to our parents like we were, yeah, like adults, and they would like kind of talk to us about like intellectual stuff and all this deep stuff, and we were kind of just like ahead of our time, I don't know, like for kids. And we would just always talk about like philosophy and just like thinking about different scenarios and like moral stuff. And I think that was like a really big part of my life. So critical thinker is one. Dreamer also kind of ties with that. Oh, caretaker was one with like the sister thing. And then self-starter kind of ties to like being like independent maybe like my whole life. And yeah, those are the ones that stand out.
So I'm interested in this advocate role because it seems like something that was modeled for you early on and could definitely be something that you could contribute on the Columbia campus in specific ways, just based on a little research, meaning research that you would do. Tell me a little bit more, just to double click on this for a second. What are some ways, like, what do you feel like you experienced early on that planted seeds for what we'll call like early advocacy experiences? Or if you are identify as an advocate now,
Mhm.
where did it all begin? Kind of like origin story stuff?
Just like kind of doing just like charity work. Like I remember going to a women's shelter and me and my mom had like cooked a bunch of food, and so we were just like giving food to like everyone in the women's shelter, and then everyone was so kind and great, and it was just kind of seeing that community and seeing like impact that I was helping make was like a really big thing. And also growing up with like, immigrant parents and having different ideas and perspectives. And then I was also taught that like, my ideas might not always be accepted. So I was kind of ready to like stand up for them always. And I've never been like afraid of like somebody else, I don't know, putting down my own beliefs or my own like identity. So that's kind of where the advocacy is like has been built in me.
Yeah. So here's what I suggest for this. Let's call it the first half of the essay, where you talk about the aspect of your life so far that's important to you. I wonder if you could even more narrowly center it around advocacy. And you start here with growing up in New York City, an immigrant family. I wonder if there were any particular experiences. You don't need to answer this now, but feel free to, jot notes. But were there experiences specifically related to advocacy that shaped who you would then become? And I wonder if the first half of this is giving sort of the experiences that you had. And then I would love to see how your understanding of advocacy matured as you grew older, because you were so young in some of these experiences. And what I would be curious to challenge you on, and this is something we talked about with the personal statement, is can you develop what I call sometimes insight 2.0? Meaning, is there something that you could write that would surprise us, that might reveal some quality, say it in an unexpected way? I think you have a good start here. And if I had to go 1 to 10, 1 being not surprising at all, 10 being wow, mind blowing, this to me is sort of in the middle range of like 5 to 7 of like, everyone carries histories and battles. We never know what other people are going through. There might be something even more specific that you've learned in your engagement in service work that might be like, oh, okay, that feels a little bit different. I'm kind of keeping this vague, but I'm challenging you to think about what's an insight here that might be even more uncommon. For the second half, I'm going to encourage you to think about, okay, if you take the advocacy lens and then go research Columbia a little more, what are those experiences that you could engage with that where you would be able to bring whatever this aspect of yourself? Now, sometimes students, when I say things like this, they're like, I don't know what this insight is. I have no idea. And you kind of have to go like sit somewhere and think about it. Sometimes it comes just from doing your research. And when you start to look in specific, specific websites and you look at Columbia, you're like, oh, that would be really cool. Oh, that could connect to, and you have an idea or a memory about something you've already experienced. And I guess my point is that sometimes you can think of the insight first. Sometimes you can find the specific opportunity and then the insight can come after that.
Mhm.
So that's where I'm going to nudge you on this one. We don't have to figure it all now because I want to make sure we get through the rest of the essays. But, I think keeping New York City immigrant family, maybe you bring in the move, maybe not. It's kind of up to you. You don't have a ton of room. And then specifics that you would engage with. And the more specific that you can get that Insight 2.0, the more that we'll be able to see it on campus. So the feeling that I should get, and I'm already kind of getting it from this, is like, ooh, I really want Alisha on campus. Something that we talked about sort of in between episodes is Columbia looking for bridge builders, right?
Mhm.
So if you're going to be an advocate, what are you going to be an advocate for? Okay. So that's my main question for that middle section. So I was going to go into the values exercise, the other exercise with you, but I feel like this advocate identity from the roles and identities list could really be something great to focus on. So I don't even think we need the values exercise, but just know that if you need more content, you could look at the values exercise to see if you could find something else that might be a little bit surprising or interesting that you can weave in there. Okay. At Columbia, the prompt reads, students representing a wide range of perspectives are invited to live and learn together. In such a community, questions and debates naturally arise. Please describe a time when you did not agree with someone and discuss how you engaged with them and what you took away from the interaction. All right, would love for you to read this, then we'll talk about it.
When I decided to start wearing hijab, no one in my immediate family wore it, and people often assumed it meant I was quiet or controlled. A couple of years later, during a family reunion photo shoot, that tension surfaced again. After I got ready, my grandparents suggested I take it off because they worried people would judge our family or me. I disagreed. Many assume the hijab represents conformity or silence, but for me, it's the opposite. It helped me embrace my individuality and express my personality more openly. I believe women should have the right to do whatever they want with their bodies and lives, even when it goes against expectations. At the same time, I understood where my grandparents were coming from. They came from a time in their lives when being open about their identity wasn't always welcomed, and they just wanted me to be safe. In our culture, respecting elders is essential. So instead of arguing, I explained why wearing hijab mattered to me and listened to their fears. Over time, the tension faded. They saw I was happier and more confident, and eventually they fully accepted it. That experience taught me that disagreement doesn't have to be combative. Standing steady in your beliefs while listening closely to someone else is what helps relationships grow stronger.
Okay. What do you think?
I think this story is true. Like it's kind of like funny to me, and I don't know. I think it's kind of like an interesting like way to like take the disagreement thing because I've read some examples and they were like an actual confrontation moment, and yeah, that's what I.
Mhm. And one of the things you said is that you were having trouble finding an experience of disagreement, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. I'm making up that you don't get in a lot of fights. Is that true?
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah. And that makes this prompt difficult because it's like, well, I don't know. When I disagree, usually things, and how do things, just because I'm curious, how do things tend to go when you disagree with people, when you have debates or, I don't know, arguments?
They tend to be I feel like I'm kind of open-minded, so it's not that I just, like I'm like, "Okay, cool," and then, like, move on to the next thing, but I listen to other people's, like, ideas, and that might change my beliefs, but then if it doesn't, then I'll just be content with what I think, and then I'll just, like, kind of let it diffuse on its own.
Yeah. I'm, I'm speaking about myself now. I'm kind of a conflict avoider.
Mhm.
For me, conflict just, it makes me uncomfortable. I consider myself to be pretty open-minded, but also it just like really, I just have a lot of discomfort with arguments.
Mhm.
Are you, is that you at all?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So this is good. I mean, good because I think others listening or counselors listening go, okay, great. Here's a student, because I'm sure counselors working on this and have students who don't get in a fight. So what do you do in a situation? And I don't want you to make up a fight. I don't want you to just lie about this, of course, but it does present an interesting challenge. I think this is an interesting topic because it definitely shows two perspectives on a thing. And if you had to just distill what the two perspectives are in this, like if you had to think of these as two characters in a movie, what does the you character want? And what do the grandparent characters want? Like or the deeper need?
Mhm. So when I was first kind of outlining this like essay, the first thing, like the main conflict that I was like thinking it was going to be about was me being kind of like a nonconformist and then them being more like conformist. And then that was the disagreement. Now it's kind of a little bit changed. It's more of just like me being open and comfortable with my identity and them being still a little bit like skeptical on sharing sharing their identity. And then that how we just had our separate beliefs and kind of combined to like a happy medium.
Yeah. And in each case, it seems like if I perspective take from Alicia's perspective, there's this conflict of desire for, well, it's two things, but what is the conflict in you? It's kind of already clear, I think, from the essay, but just to hear you name it aloud, what are you pulled between when you're listening to them? Like, what are the twin wants? What are the twin desires that are running in conflict to one another?
I'm pulled between my own desire to like wear the hijab and represent my culture and identity, and also my own culture and identities, actual like beliefs that like you can't kind of argue against your like elders, and you just have to just listen to whatever they say.
Yeah.
And
So it's like need to respect elders on the one hand, but also need or desire for self-expression, freedom, autonomy on the other.
yeah,
Yeah. And
sorry.
go ahead.
It's also kind of like the irony of just like hijab is in my own religion and culture, and then within my own religion and culture, I'm kind of finding obstacles there as well.
Hmm. Hmm. I think that's a really interesting thing. And you've kind of hinted at that in your telling of it, but I got it a little bit differently when you something you said about conformity, you use it in here, but I think there might be something worth drawing out even more in terms of the irony around conformity or non-conformity. I think there's a piece missing of detail that I kind of assumed, but I think the reader could use, which is that other people in your family do not wear hijab, correct?
Mhm.
Yeah, that you were maybe the only one there.
Yeah, I was the only one.
Okay, that's interesting context because I think without that they might not know. So I would include that first of all. Okay, a little bit of context, a little bit of maybe draw out the irony potentially, so we can kind of see this, and then just to go over to their perspective. So if you're thinking between autonomy, freedom versus respecting your elders, what are they? If you had to imagine, what is their perspective? What are they? What are the twin desires that are running into conflict with one another?
Their perspective is wanting their, I guess, grandparent, wanting their grandchild to kind of respect what their culture is and just listen to what they say. And I guess also wanting to let their grandchild, I guess, just be the way that she wants to be, maybe.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it seems like there's some desire for. You said here that their concern was that they just wanted me to be safe.
Hmm.
Can you say more about that?
Yeah, I think so. They were also immigrants and they immigrated very early on. And I guess at the time, the way that I see it is that the time that they came here, they probably had to be a little safer about like being open about their identity. So that's where I believe that they probably have that kind of feeling of like, oh, like what will people think, and like what if you get in trouble? What if it's not safe? So that's why they kind of have that struggle, I think.
What do you think, if you had, again, you're having to guess here, but what do you imagine that they were worried could happen to you?
I mean, like hate crime. I'm not sure.
At its worst, maybe, but when you say safe, I'm just curious, like
Mhm.
what you imagine they imagine, or,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
So anyway, it's just something it's interesting when you use safe. I think it's not like immediately, instantly assumed that
Right.
the reader's going to know what you mean in terms of that. I think that we can sort of imply, but there might be something there to draw out a little bit more. The reason I'm slowing down and pointing this out is that I think for these essays, it's important for us to understand what each side is fighting for in a way, or and drama happens when there are conflicting wants. And we can see your conflicting wants here, and we can see their conflicting wants here. And as far as the story goes, we're sitting on the edge of our seats wondering who's going to win, like which side will win out. Now,
Mhm.
I think you're doing a pretty good job of that. I think that in the first paragraph, you can probably trim it to more efficiently sort of get to the core of the thing and the core irony. What it's going to mean is probably more succinct telling. So if it's, let's say it's about 112 words. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is like, can you get that down to like 75, or half? And one way to do that, just side note, is you can just tell the story, like, and just record yourself. You can use, the Google Doc thing feature, or you can say it into, a voice memo and transcribe it. But basically say it more quickly. And it can even help to just bullet point it just to get it more efficiently. And then there's the moment, and then there's the moment of the next part where we need to sort of understand what each person was wanting, I think, if it's not immediately obvious. And you sort of got that there. I think that could be slightly more clearly articulated. But then the crucial moment here, I think, is the transition when the thing resolves itself. And the way it resolves right now is over time, the tension faded, which is real. Like if it was a movie and it kind of faded out and then it faded back in and everything's fine, we're kind of like, wait, what happened?
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
it's a tricky moment. So you say after this, they saw that I was happier and more confident, and eventually they fully accepted it. So what do you
Mhm.
think actually happened that made the tension fade?
Well, I think that I'm actually not too sure because like we said, like we're a little scared of confrontation and stuff like that. So I kind of just let it like I talked to them kind of saying that like, yeah, I do want to like wear it, but then they didn't really share too much of their opinions. I'm not sure how they feel about it now, but like I still wear it. So now I'm not too sure.
Even though it might be kind of scary, I wonder, would you be open to asking them about this experience and seeing if they remember it and just seeing what they might say? Could you ask them?
Mhm. I could ask them.
I think it might be interesting. I know it's like it's weird homework,
Mhm.
but I think there's some like missing information here a little bit.
Yeah.
And it makes me curious what they would say
Mhm.
and why, how it shifted. Because I bet you there's more. And even the thing about you're guessing, I don't
Mhm.
think you're wrong about like they wanted you to be safe. Like actually asking them, like, what do you feel? What was going on for you in that
Uh-huh.
experience? And maybe even asking them how their perspective has shifted if it has. I mean, that's kind of a presumptuous question. It's kind of assuming. But I think it might be interesting to
Okay.
have a
And
conversation. Yeah.
you think anything of like what I said like just now, would that be valuable in the story or like is it just like context or whatever?
Maybe it's a 150 word essay and you're already going to spend half of it sort of setting up the context.
Mhm.
This feels like it's sort of part of the middle, but it's not a 350 word essay. So I think, you know, as I, I just think talking to them,
Mhm.
shortening the beginning, and then
Mhm.
seeing what you can put in the middle because it's going to be super short is going to impact your ending. Because right now, the experience taught me that disagreement doesn't have to be combative is fine, but I think that there might be a deeper insight that's possible here.
Okay. Cool. Well, I'll take the risk.
All right. So I want to leave this one for now then, and sort of it's going to be a little TBD, but structurally speaking, see if you can trim that start to give the context and then give us a little, help us understand who's fighting for what in part two, if it's not already obvious from the opening. And then I'd love for you to just take whatever happens in that conversation and let it inform the ending here, because I have a feeling that there could be some interesting stuff that comes up that maybe changes the ending.
Okay.
Okay. Number four. In college and university, students are often challenged in ways they could not anticipate. Please describe a situation in which you've navigated through adversity and discuss how you changed as a result. So again, read it and then we'll talk about it.
This summer, I was accepted to a neuroscience internship at the University of Calgary. The opportunity felt incredible, but it terrified me. I had never traveled alone and never worked in a lab full of graduate students and PhDs. On my first day, watching them isolate hippocampi with such precision, I worried they would think I wasn't good enough. Outside the lab, the loneliness hit too. The summer campus was mostly empty, and I didn't have anyone my age to talk to. The turning point came when I refused to give in to my imposter syndrome and was determined to learn. I stayed after hours, assisting with anything I possibly could, being curious about every topic, and offering up my own thoughts about the study. Observation began turning into gaining trust and involvement. The researchers taught me a complicated dissection of snail ganglia, and that summer I perfected my technique to successfully retrieve microscopic neural cells. Outside the lab, I was learning just as much. Navigating a city I didn't know and managing every part of my day without anyone prompting me taught me how to advocate for myself. I learned how to ask for help when I needed it and how to trust that I can grow into challenges for which I don't feel ready. This experience changed how I see myself as a learner. I used to think I had to be perfectly ready before stepping into something difficult, but I know now that if I'm willing to follow my curiosity, even when it feels intimidating, I will always grow into the challenge.
Okay. What do you think?
I think it's definitely a bit long, but I couldn't really find like a huge like challenge or adversity that like someone in like a narrative essay might talk about. So I kind of focused on something a little less like big of a challenge, but yeah, I think it was like a learning experience for me. So
Hmm. Yeah. One of the things that I noticed when I was hearing you read it is there's a similar structure to other essays that I've heard before, where it's the main challenge is something like it's some version of finding your voice, like shyness or something. And it's, first of all, just to like counting up from zero, this is a great experience to have. Like building confidence, it's just like, oh my gosh, yes. And the way that it's structured currently, it could sound like other essays that are sort of a similar structure where it's like, I felt, like I didn't belong here. And then this thing happened. So a thing that you could do potentially is just to also shorten it, is you could start in the moment where you are confronted with this, some kind of experience, and there's sort of the rush of whatever it is, imposter syndrome, the voices in your head telling you you can't, you shouldn't be here, that kind of thing. What that'll do is that it'll sort of put us in the moment of tension of like, and then you can sort of flash back and give us the context of here I was, da 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 da, and that'll sort of trim it. And and then I'd be curious to know what was it that shifted for you that allowed you to feel more confident. So let's imagine, sort of from an objective standpoint, here is Alisha. She's put in the situation where she's being asked to do things she hasn't done before. There's this rush of, do I belong? Some version of that. What shifted for you?
I think one was like the realization of like where I was, and I was like, wow, like I made it this far and like I'm all the way here. And like I can't let this opportunity like go to a waste. Like I need to get everything that I like possibly can out of it. And then also it was like there were some other, I guess, people who went to like take a look at the lab, and they were like much older than me and kind of like a little bit uninterested in the lab. And I was like, okay, like if there's like something I can do to like make myself like feel better, I just need to like just go for it and like ask more questions than they ask, and just like I like made it a challenge in my head. I was like, I just like need to win. So I just kind of made myself feel comfortable by just keep on asking questions. Like even if I felt dumb at first, like I was just like, just keep going for it.
Hmm. What I'm listening for as I'm listening to you talk is I'm listening for some kind of skill or value or quality that you either developed for the first time or that you strengthen in this experience. So one of the things I heard you say is like your question asker self, your curiosity, there was something there that you like that came online. It seems like in a fuller way. So if the first part of this essay is like, here's me in the experience, here's the context, what put me here, and then here's the realization that I had, it's sort of like an opportunity, I think, to show some skill or something that came online. And the resources that I'm going to give, and you don't have to figure it out right now, but again, are the roles and identities one and the values exercise. Because I just want you to like look at those menus, as it were. Let's just look at the values one for just a second, because we looked at the roles and identities one for the earlier essay. And I'll put it in the chat here for you. And I wonder if you could look at that. And this is also a great exercise for coming up with insights. But is there something that came online that kicked in? And it doesn't have to be a movie moment where it was like I stared down at the microscope, but over those days or week or whatever, is there something else that you feel you can maybe highlight here?
So, like, personal development is one that, like, stands out. So I can't really find it too much, but, like, one thing, like, when I like, autonomy kind of just,
Ooh.
like,
Yeah.
that, like, thing of me, like, being independent my whole life, like, this really brought it out because it was, like, the first time I was away from my family, like, I was just, like, alone, and it kind of helped me thrive. I realized my whole life I thought that I would be better, like, independent and, like, on my own or whatever, like, I'm good at that, but, like, this experience showed me, like, okay, I am capable of, like, being on my own and, like, I can do this, I guess.
Right. Okay. Cool. So this quality of autonomy is such a beautiful quality. And you already got more examples of this, like in the navigating the city.
Mm.
So I wonder if the center of the essay could be about autonomy and what you learned about your own relationship to autonomy, for instance. So it's like part one, the experience, the sort of like moment of truth, like, part two, context, raise the stakes, let us know why you were feeling what you were feeling. Part three is whatever happened in that experience that led you to a realization about autonomy. And it could go one of two ways, because I heard you say it in two different ways. One is that you developed autonomy then. Two, another way you could go with this is I had always been autonomous, or so I thought. But something in this experience had you realize something about your autonomy, about your relationship to autonomy. And then I'd love for you to keep some of these pieces of you navigating the city, but I want to encourage you to do it with even more specifics because again, super hardcore. But if I look at this sentence, someone else could have written it. Navigating a city I didn't know, managing every part of my day without anyone prompting me, taught me how to advocate for myself. Like great, like on a heart level from Ethan to Alisha, I'm like, oh, that's amazing. From a college essay guy, student applying to Columbia, I'm like, someone else could write that sentence.
Mm.
So when you say I learned to ask for help when I needed it, Ethan to Alicia, oh, amazing. Super critical eye, yes, but give me some specifics. Like, what are some of the specific things you were able to do to navigate, you know, writing whatever it was, navigating transportation, like all those specific
Yeah.
things will kind of tell us all these things. So give us some just quick, short, specific details. That'll help the essay pop.
One question I had is, like, I was kind of struggling while writing the essay because I could take this autonomy thing. Well, now I'm focusing on the autonomy, but I could take it with like the more academic part of the lab and like figuring things out in there, or I could take it like outside the lab. I have a bunch of like stories I feel like from there as well. So, do you think I could include like both of them kind of in there, or do you think I should just focus on one?
150 words. So if you're dedicating the first, let's say, quarter, maybe the first third to experience that and then context for the that's probably at least 50 words, maybe it's 75. So you'll have about 75 words left. Try for both. Like, here's autonomy in the lab, and then here's autonomy outside the lab, if you can do it. And if you can't, just focus on one.
Okay, cool.
But would be neat to see it in both places, if you can.
Sounds good.
All right. Essay 5. Here we go. Why are you interested in attending Columbia University? We encourage you to consider the aspects that you find unique and compelling about Columbia. They're asking, hey, get specific. What are the things that are different? What make Columbia different from other schools you're applying to? So let's hear it.
Columbia's curriculum and community are the perfect fit for me to continue making change in the world. Working with neurodivergent students through Running Start taught me that behavior is a pattern to be understood rather than a problem to be fixed. That's why I can't wait to work in the Lugo lab. Dr. Lugo's focus on resilience factors in ADHD aligns with my own approach to mentorship. I want to work with their developmental neuroimaging studies, moving beyond diagnosing struggles to mapping the protective factors that allow neurodivergent children to thrive. I'm also excited by Columbia's interdisciplinary research culture. SURF mentors like Dr. Andres Badensky, who studies the neuronal foundations of social behavior, and Dr. Frank Polo, whose work explores the evolution of human cognition, pursue the exact questions that shape my curiosity about why brains learn and reason so differently. Through the Zuckerman Institute and the DSI Scholars Program, I hope to build computational neural models that connect neural mechanisms with lived behavior. And through Kuno, I want to translate those discoveries and give back to NYC youth.
Okay. What do you think?
It's a little bit choppy because I did a lot of research on like a bunch of different programs and like I loved them all. So I was trying to like fill it in. And also there's like no conclusion because I was like worried about the word count. But as far as the programs, I like them and I feel like they connect with me a lot. But I kind of just need a little help like working into like a readable essay, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In 150 words. So side note, if you can't get a conclusion, it's fine. It can be one of those that just stops. And if it's a longer one, 250 words, great. You can have a sentence or two, but it's fine. So what is the thing in your heart of hearts? You kind of spoke to this, that there are a lot of things, but is there something that really sets Columbia apart that you're really excited about?
Well, one is I didn't mention it because I feel like everyone would probably mention it, is that like it's in New York City. It's in the heart of it and it's like so close to all these really cool like tech hubs and medical hubs and just everything. And then also the research, like it's really research heavy and I really love that. And I feel like there's a lot of opportunities for like undergrad and like first year students to get their like get their hands dirty, I guess. And yeah, I also found this DSI Scholars Program, which I mentioned is about like data science. And I want to do neuroscience and tech and kind of like find the intersection between that. So that's why I'm really interested in that.
Yeah. Great. Well, I don't know if this will surprise you or not, but I think it's actually a good idea to weave in New York City just a little bit for this one. And I have this from a Columbia rep that I talked to a few years ago. But one of the things they said was, I really like it. And I look for a mention of New York being mentioned in the YS because, you know, if a student is applying to Columbia, it is in the city. This is coming from a guy who used to live 20 blocks from Columbia. So, I mean, it is urban as urban. It is in the city. So that I recommend weaving in. I don't think you need to start with it. I think it could be something that you mention later, but I think it's worth it. And there's an energy and excitement that I think you can bring, and you can do it in like a sentence or two. The other thing that you mentioned, I'm just going to say it back to you, is it being research heavy? That might be a great starting place. I think that's something to definitely weave in. How did you respond when you read about the curriculum? Like, what excites you? What interests you about Columbia's curriculum?
I feel like it's just like not like a like normal like class, any normal class that I've ever been in. I feel like everything is so like just like yeah, like you just get in there and actually like do the work rather than just like learning about it theoretically. I feel like there's so many opportunities to like actually like make change.
Hmm. I would encourage you, because the core curriculum is so specific. I would encourage you to go back and look just a little bit more at the core curriculum and see why it feels like a real fit for you. Because I think if you could say something about the core curriculum, and then you've got plenty of, like, I love the research. I mean, I think you should just call that out specifically and maybe name a couple of examples of this. And then a little New York City here, that could give you a kind of 1, 2, 3 that I think would kind of touch on all the things. As far as some of these opportunities, working with neurodivergent students through Running Start, I like that connection back to you. I was noticing as I was reading this that I was wanting a little more of that. But why Alicia? Because it's pretty heavily after that, you know, why Columbia? So you talk, for instance, in the third paragraph about being excited about mentors, you know, who study neuronal foundations of social behavior. And, you know, you say, pursue the exact questions that shape my curiosity about why brains learn and reason so differently. Good, but it's a little bit ambiguous, a little bit vague there. So I would go core curriculum and why Alicia, research heavy, and the specific stuff that you've gotten into, and then New York City as a thriving, you know, place. Like, what is it that you love about it? What are you excited to connect with? I think you can mention it being a tech hub, and back to you. And I think those three pieces would probably be about all you could do in 150. What that'll probably mean is, even though you're excited about, these different research opportunities, probably dialing it in and focusing on one or two would probably do it. I think it's fine also to bring your enthusiasm. I feel like there's so many exciting research opportunities. How do I pick? Some of that enthusiasm I think would be great, because it's a little bit straightforward right now.
Yeah.
And there's an enthusiasm that I sense from you when you talk about it that isn't quite yet coming through in the tone of this. And so what I'm going to challenge you to do is, how can you bring that enthusiasm, the excitement that you have, and here's the challenge, without exclamation points. And I say this because sometimes students think, oh, I'll just show my excitement by putting exclamation points. People do this in the Stanford roommate essay all the time. I'm not saying that they're bad. And just so people are listening, I'm not saying you can't use exclamation points. What I'm challenging you to do is, how do you convey that without just putting an exclamation point on a sentence to be like, there, now it's enthusiastic. So core curriculum, what is it about the research, how it connects to stuff that you've done, and then why the city?
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
So kind of just like bring my voice through. Yeah, I see what you mean. It's like very
And
like
voice. Yeah, I guess that's the fourth note. And bringing that with your voice, and all of that in 150 ways. But, it's like 150, and I'm giving you three pieces. I think sort of 50-ish words each should probably do it. Okay. All right. Last one. It always annoys me that these prompts aren't switched, because they ask, what attracts you to your preferred areas of study at Columbia? And I just wish they asked for that first, because it's like, here's what I want to study, and then here's why Columbia. They're switched.
Yeah.
There must be a reason for it. But anyway, let's hear it.
My interest in neuroscience started in computer science. I grew up teaching myself coding on Khan Academy and Code.org, convinced CS would define my future, but it wasn't until I began working with real teams that I understood what drew me in. During my internship at American Specialty Health, I watched engineers solving problems together, and I saw innovation happening through people, not just code. In AP Computer Science A, I redesigned our class's curriculum into a collaborative, project-based system, and I watched students who had barely spoken start working with others. CS became more human to me, and I started seeing it as a social science. This interest followed me into AP Psychology and Sociology, where I learned cognition is shaped by both neural and social factors. Through Running Start, guiding neurodivergent students with ADHD and autism using cognitive behavioral strategies, I learned how understanding the brain could transform real lives. My curiosity sharpened in Dr. Naweed Sayed's lab at the Hotchkiss Brain Institute. I cultured hippocampal neurons, analyzed dopamine pathways in the ventral tegmental area, and watched neural firing patterns appear in multi-electrode arrays. Studying how anesthetics affect children's cognition showed me how research can inspire real solutions. The more I study the brain, the more I see neuroscience turning questions about emotion and behavior into solvable patterns. At Columbia, I hope to explore neural computation and behavioral science together, developing tools that help people understand their minds.
Cool. All right. What do you think?
I think so. For this one, I used your supplemental essay guide on Columbia University, and it said for the Y major, talk about kind of what was it, a montage of all these different things that brought you to the major in your life. And I really wanted to highlight the interdisciplinary kind of side of neuroscience and talk about tech too. I don't know how well starting with tech works, but it's also chronological order. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so there's a Y major guide too, right? Where the one that I talk about, where I talk about it being an interdisciplinary, you want to bring out the interdisciplinariness of whatever the major is. And here you've got, and what are you checking the box for, just so that folks are super clear on it?
Neuroscience.
Neuroscience. So just to zoom back a second, how do you see neuroscience as being interdisciplinary? What are the different disciplines that you're interested in?
Mm-hmm. So I think one main thing that I'm interested in is computational neuroscience, which is using tech to actually that's what I did in the neuroscience lab that I went to. They used these fake, not fake, these chips, and kind of grew neurons on them and created an environment of the brain, and then made and tested solutions and stuff on that. And that was just the coolest thing ever. And I really want to go into computational neuroscience.
Mm-hmm. So there's great. So the first one I'm hearing in terms of like the disciplines is there's like technology. What are some of the other disciplines? And spoiler, there are already some that are in your essay, but what are some of the other aspects of neuroscience that are interesting to you?
I think like the cognitive, I guess, side of it, just like understanding why people think how they think and like how their behaviors shape like who they are, I guess. I think that side is really interesting to me. Like the kind of psychology side of it is really interesting to me. So like there's like applied and like theoretical sides of it, and I think I'm more interested in the applied sides of it. Like I want to make like actual solutions.
Neat. That's coming through clearly. So and what I'm kind of doing is like, we're doing an x-ray of the essay because you've said it, I want to do this interdisciplinary thing. And we're looking to see, okay, are the different disciplines discussed in the essay? And so far they are. So in the first part, we get your interest in tech. You talk about computer science. In the second part, you talk about psychology, sociology, specifically. And then you talk about cognitive science, watching neural firing patterns appear on multi-electrode arrays. So that I think that these are coming through, and there's both the theoretical and the applied when you talk about, hey, I want to actually apply these in the world. So I think this is working pretty well, and we get those different pieces of it. There's a decision to be made. You don't have to do this, of calling out specifically that I see this as being an interdisciplinary thing, and here are the different parts that interest me. If you want to do that at some point, either at the beginning or at the end, for instance, you totally could, because that seems to be like the unspoken thesis here. Do you need to? I don't necessarily know if you do. It's kind of up to you, but I just wanted to throw that out as an option. So, scene one, as it were, we've got early interest in neuroscience, computer science. We see you coding, and then we see you quickly up level to working with teams, doing this internship. I like that you're weaving in these other experiences that you've had, watching engineers solve problems. I like that you're weaving in your AP computer science involvement because we see that you're taking higher level science. And I love that you say I started seeing it as a social science, because that segues beautifully into the next paragraph where you weave in running start. Side note, if you end up cutting running start from the essay above, you're okay because you're weaving it in here a little bit. Curiosity sharpened in this lab at the Hotchkiss Brain Institute. This is like the fourth or fifth thing that you've woven in where you're having these different touch points, and we're seeing the sort of the steps go up where each step, and really by step, I mean like almost every sentence has a new experience that gave some new thing, that taught you some new aspect, and it all follows under this umbrella of computational neuroscience. You say towards the end, the more I study the brain, the more I see neuroscience turning questions and about emotion and behavior into solvable patterns. This is my sort of nitpicking side. At Columbia, I hope to explore neural computation and behavioral science together, developing tools that help help people understand their minds. For my money, this notion of exploring neural computation and behavioral science together, I think it works at the end. I want to have you just think about, what if you put that at the start? How would that change things? I don't know if it's necessarily better, but I think there's a way that when I read that, I'm like, oh, it orients me in a particular way, that if I knew that from the jump, then it kind of gives me the umbrella. And then as you sort of explain all these moments, by the way, I think either can work. I think giving the moments and then you give this sort of inevitable but somewhat surprising conclusion, I think can work. There was some part of me that was hungering for something that was slightly more uncommon at the end. Developing tools that help people understand their minds. It could work, but there's some little part of me that's like, is that right? I wonder if there's some little thing, because this is probably going to be the last essay that they read from you, that could either pop in a way that's like, oh, that's unexpected, or sort of brings everything together. And I know that's a lot of pressure to put on the end of the application, especially in like the last few sentences. But if we imagine our journey from personal statement, activities list, additional info, we've woven our way through the supplements, and then how we got to stick the landing. Part of me goes, I'm just going to challenge you this week. If you were to bring that sentence to the start, is there something else that would help us see, okay, we're sort of arriving, that this is the moment, and it's not the end. This is really just sort of like a midpoint in your journey or whatever, another stepping stone. But is there a way to sort of land it in a way that would feel like, all of these experiences have kind of brought us here?
And for like the landing, would you think like my ultimate like goal, like what I actually like want to do, because I was having a little bit of trouble, like a lot of like past supplementals as well for like other schools have said like what do you want to do
Yeah.
with this major and stuff, and that's where it's like a little bit more difficult for me, because I feel like there's not right now like too many like careers and like solutions and stuff with like neuroscience and tech, and like I don't even know what like the name of the job would be that like I'm doing, and like it's a little difficult to think of like what's the end goal that I actually want to do. So yeah, do you have any like, I don't know, guidance like to
Yeah.
say?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the way that you're trending, I think is a really interesting one. And I'm gonna be like two thumbs up, like keep going in that direction. Because I think that giving them a sense of where you're headed, even if you don't know specifically what the career is gonna be, what that direction is gonna be, I think is a way to sort of bring things together. So two ideas. One is there a way that you could think back through application? It might even involve like reading back through and sort of seeing all the pieces come together. If we were to sort of be like, oh, this is the moment where at the end of the mystery, we sort of see, oh, wow, okay, all of it came together to sort of land. And there might be some little, I don't know, you kind of call it like a pulling the pieces together or mini highlight reel where you sort of bring together some different things. Of course, if you do that, you're going to need to sort of trim by just a little bit each of these pieces up here. And you'll, in terms of doing that, what I would say is, again, bullet points can be really helpful. And when you bullet point something, some of the in between language sort of ends up getting trimmed and you end up sort of going with just the information, which I think is fine, a 150 word essay. When it comes to the ending here, okay, so again, looking back through, how is this sort of making sense as the thing, the major that sort of pulls it all together? When it comes to researching the future of what you want to do, what could be out there, I'm just going to put it back on you. I'm going to literally ask you the question back. What are some different ways that you could see yourself researching the answer? In other words, how could you find out what careers are out there?
Okay. I would probably search up like new findings, I guess, in like tech plus neuroscience would be like one. Let's see. Mm. Hmm.
How would you search for this? Like, where would you go to find out?
I think, well, one thing I learned from, I guess, like researching is that research, like once research is done, you find kind of the question is what you do. Like the research that we figured out, we were answering one question, and then from there, I think what I would be interested in is figuring out a solution to the actual like question or finding that did. So maybe I would like research and like the most recent, I guess, like findings in research, and then I would go about like trying to figuring out like the solutions to those problems.
Mm-hmm. And how do you research these days? Like, what are you using? Are you using Google? Are you using AI? Like, how are you researching things?
I'm using Google, occasionally AI. We're testing out the stuff, but I think mostly just like Google and yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the reason I'm asking is I'm just curious how, when you say search up, like where you literally go, what I would say in some situations is like, well, go talk to adults that who are familiar with us. And many students listening aren't going to have those adults. So I think Google is a friend here. There's a website I think we've talked about maybe at some point called ONET Online that can be useful for this. That's got basically, hey, you put in a potential career and it'll give you stuff. But if you don't know what the career is, it's kind of hard to use that. This is a situation where, aside from one other situation, I think that AI can really be a friend. And what I mean by this is, and I think we talked about this maybe at some point. If not, maybe it was a different episode. But I think using AI to research schools, and saying, for instance, hey, I'm interested in exploring X, Y, and Z at Columbia. What are some opportunities on the Columbia campus that might be interesting to me? Give me links, because you have to verify. to explore further. And I think that this will help speed up the research. This is like for the Y Columbia essay, et cetera. I think that researching potential majors and careers, I think that AI can be a friend here. And a couple different ways that you can do this. One is to, first of all, turn off the settings so that it shares your essays with the world, so that it just, shares your searches locally. In other words, so that it keeps them somewhat private. I don't know how private that actually is, but just for everybody listening, there's a thing that you can click and you can, search up how to do this. But basically, you're sort of by default with ChatGPT, for instance, your information is sort of shared and it's training the machine, the brain, and you can turn that setting off. So once you do that, I think giving the context of I'm interested in X, Y, Z, and Q, and you can put in your bullet points and say, here are the things that I'm interested in. I'm interested in, studying these things potentially at Columbia, but I'm not sure what my major is. Ask me some questions to help me dial in to help me think about my major. And it'll prompt you with questions. It'll give you things to think about and give you ideas about where you could potentially go with that. I'm not right now going to the step of like, tell me what different careers are. Although that's another option too, is like based on my interest in computational neuroscience and this, here are the things that I've done, the experiences I've had, what are some potential applications out in the world that could, be interesting to me and give me some links that I could explore further. A third thing you could do though, is to say, here's what I'm interested in studying. I'm interested in solving some big problems. And what are some big problems that are out there in the world that people are exploring right now that might interest me? And so as you're thinking, and give me links, right, to go explore these. So you can go like search for big problems and find some interesting things that you might, and don't even worry about solutions yet, but talking about some of the problems and finding a couple of problems could be really interesting and could help even shape which of these details you end up keeping and which ones you end up cutting. Curious how any of that lands for you.
Yeah, this tool looks pretty cool, like this ONET as well, and then like the AI. I think I can, yeah, that sounds really interesting. One question, I don't know, it's just like I was a little curious. When you said that you can turn off like the data sharing thingy, what's the like why would you need to do that?
I think some people listening might fear that if they took elements of their essay or pasted it into ChatGPT, that would, okay, now my information's out there. It's sort of a
Yeah.
privacy thing. It's funny
Okay.
because I think younger generations in some case are less worried about privacy. Like
Yeah.
when I sometimes talk to students about this and I'll talk about privacy issues, some adults are very like, privacy, and they're sort of wagging a finger. And students are a little bit more like, "Well, so what? Like, so what if my essay is like put into ChatGPT?" And I don't know. It's maybe it's a generational thing,
Yeah.
but yeah. Why do you
Yeah.
ask?
Yeah, and I was just curious because I was like, huh, I don't like, is that like a problem? Like, would I get like the university C or something? But yeah,
No.
that makes, yeah, no,
Yeah.
it might be like a generation. A lot of my friends are like, they hear like TikTok is like stealing our data, and they're like, okay, so they can have
Yeah.
my data.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
I think this is a really interesting difference between generations here, where people are like, I don't care, like what's that going to do? Like, what is anybody going to do to me? So that's an interesting we could do a whole separate episode on that. I want to name though that I'm advocating here for a very specific use of ChatGPT, which is this goes without saying, but I'll just go ahead and say it. And I've said this on the podcast before, but I don't think students should copy and paste, exactly the language that ChatGPT is giving you into your essays. I think the words should be yours. What I'm advocating for is using it as a tool for researching interesting, difficult problems and what's out there in the medical world that you might come across if you were surfing the net or on TikTok, by coincidence, by luck or by rigor, if you know sort of what to read and where to look. I also want to encourage you to go back to all those podcasts and those books and all of the things that you've been engaged with, Hidden Brain, Radio Lab, Human Lab. I would just, I would encourage you to like, in a way that you could do this is just like to scan back through previous episodes that you've loved, because it could be something that in there that you're like, ooh, that totally connects to computational neuroscience in an interesting way. The other thing you can do is you can take your list of things that you read and that you're interested in and use that as context to prompt ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever you use to say, hey, here are the things that I'm interested in based on these things, the things you've listed in terms of psych, sociology, computer science, and here's some of the media that I consume. What are some problems that I would be interested in potentially? And give me links. And it might just make for some more interesting reading for you.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good.
Cool. I feel nervous saying that to you because I think people sometimes are like, I shouldn't use ChatGPT at all. I don't think you should use the copy and paste. I do think it's a great research tool.
Yeah.
And I think you get it too.
Yeah.
Cool.
Don't worry.
I don't worry about you. Yeah, totally. Okay. So, yeah, I'm excited to see where these go. And just in terms of our connection on this, I welcome you to send these back to me. If we end up having time, we can record a whole episode. If not, we'll do it asynchronously and we'll just see. I mean, folks who are listening, there will either be another episode on this or there won't. I mean, I think that I would love to follow up with you definitely next year in terms of where you end up getting in, and maybe we look at the final drafts in that episode, but and sort of as you reflect on this whole process. But TBD for everybody listening, whether we're going to do an episode in the next couple of weeks where we sort of see the final drafts, or if you'll have to wait till next year to hear from Alisha again. How are you feeling? How was this for you?
I'm feeling good. I really appreciate all the feedback, and I'll definitely be making changes. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that there's a lot to work on, because if my first draft was perfect, I think that would be a little crazy. So yeah, I'm excited to make the changes.
Cool. I love the way that you're embracing that and embracing the drafting process, because this is truly an iterative process. We've talked about this before, but a thing that I'll say to you is I don't know what drafts these are, if these are second drafts or third drafts, but what I'll sometimes say is keep not rush, but keep moving forward to the fifth draft. Because when you've gotten, especially with these supplements, when you start to get into those fourth and fifth drafts, then it's something really starts to take shape. And for students listening who are perfectionists, who are trying to get it perfect on that first draft, I just want to say, just write it, as Anne Lamott used to say, write a crappy first draft so that you can get to a more refined draft. That's just going to take time. So these feel like they're in that sort of second or third draft. And if you just keep going, they're going to get more specific. They're going to get more dialed in. And yeah, and I can tell just the way that and you've done this the whole process, but the way that you're embracing that is really, I really admire it.
Thank you.
Cool. All right. I will talk to you via email, and stay tuned, folks, for when the next episode with Alisha will be. Thanks again, Alisha, so much.
Of course. Thank you.
Thanks, friends, for listening. You'll find our show notes, as ever, at collegeessayguy.com/podcast. Click around on that there site, and you'll find info about our upcoming webinars, courses for students, and professional development sessions for counselors, and lots more. Be well and stay curious.